Okay, thank you. Well, what I want to do is to present a very modest reflection on the importance of social relations and what it means to care for people, particularly people with disabilities and fragilities, by creating relational goods. Now, everybody talks about relationships, but I think that relations are the great unknown. We do not know what relations are. And that's because relations are invisible and immaterial. We cannot see them. We cannot touch them. And they are like the light, you know. We don't see the light. We see with the light. So it is for social relations. We don't see relations. We see with relations, through relations, together with relations. So we can understand the problems of people with disability through the light of relational. Take, for instance, the last discussion about the difference between education and instruction. Now, relationality discriminates between the two. Education implies interpersonal relations, while instruction doesn't, because you can instruct by using an artificial intelligence, a robot, or whatever, because instruction is to give information, to give cognitive knowledge of anything. But education implies a certain kind of relationality. So this is particularly important, I think, for people with disabilities. Now, this is the contents of my written paper, and I don't want, of course, to explain anything because we are quite tired. So I will be very, very quick in explaining my message. The message is precisely to understand what relational goods are in caring for people. So we need to understand the relational meaning of care, to understand why and how the relationship is the foundation of care, and what about the COVID-19 pandemic, which has shown us, taught us a lot of things about the importance of relations, because we were deprived of good social relations. We were isolated and so on and so forth. So care is a gift for the other, and the gift is in the relation. It's the relationship itself, the gift of the relation. So we have to understand relationships and knowing how to manage, because this is a kind of culture we don't have. So we have to understand what it means provide care as a relational service that creates relational goods. I don't want to go into the health and social systems at the macro level, particularly because it would be too long. What about care through technology? For instance, the case for the use of robots in helping people with disabilities. In this case, for instance, elderly people. Elderly people need robots. They need robots, but the robot doesn't respect my human dignity. So the robot is very useful for many functions, performances, but the robot doesn't respect my humanity, my human dignity. So we can and we must rethink the formal informal organization of care for people with disabilities. And finally, just to mention the issue of bioethics, I think that humanizing care requires a relational bioethics, which is not so far. So caring for others consists of a certain relationality, of giving and receiving in a certain way, that is, of creating a certain social relation. Now, this relationship is a third party included between the self and the other. The relationship is not what we think of the other, of the situation, of what a relationship is. The relationship is another order of reality. It's a reality in between me and you, between the caregiver and the care receiver. And this is the difficulty precisely to understand this third in between the self and the other. Why the relationship is the foundation of care. One cannot look after the other if, first of all, one is not concerned with the relationship with the other. Before looking at the person and understanding what are the problems, the difficulties, the disabilities, etc., of that person, I have to understand what kind of relationship we have, me and the other. So taking care of the other and cultivating the relationship are not the same thing. I cannot care the other if I do not realize what kind of relational context we are embodied in. For example, many health services deal only with the biopsychic body of the person with a disability, while the human relationship lacks listening and empathy, so that there is no sensitive management of the person and her relational network. What about COVID-19? It has taught us a lot of things. First of all, the social relations are not accidental elements of little importance. They decide about life and death. Disability, frailty, illness, care, and care modalities are relational problems. During the pandemic, all these issues asked us to translate them into relational problems. Precisely because the COVID-19 prevented us from having a certain kind of relationships. Third, if care relationships are reduced to the role relationships, people are dehumanized. And this happens very often in the care relationships because people look at their role, at their task, but not to the relationship. And fourth, the fair distance or proximity between people is not a physical quantity, but a relational quality. And that should be explained in more details. Anyway, caring is a gift, not charity in the sense of beneficent for the other. And the gift is in the relationship. The expression be to care refers to a conception of the nature of the human person as a relational giving being. Being the subject and recipient of care reveals the quality of the human essence, which is unique among living beings. My response to the question of this morning about what is a person is that the human person is unique because a very special essence which is a relational essence. This is what qualifies a human person in respect to any other person. For instance, today you know that, for instance, in the European Union documents, they talk about electronic persons, refer to robots and AI artifacts. So what differs between a human person and the electronic person? Precisely, the different essence in terms of relationality, ability to relate to other entities. So care is an openness to the other who needs above all acceptance, recognition, and involvement. And all these three qualities are relational. They imply a particular relationality. Life is received as a gift and must be reciprocated as a gift. Reciprocity is the essence of human relationality, which is not of artifacts. So care must overcome the otherness, in inverted commas, of persons with disabilities. Caring for others means facing otherness in a double sense. The otherness is between any kind of person, disabled or not, with disabilities or not. First, because it involves overcoming the border, sometimes the wall, which divides those who are strong and those who are weak, and the fear that the other can arouse. We cannot deny that people in general, common people, have some fears about people who are in great difficulty. Second, it's about validating and also thanking the other for an identity different from ours. And that's not very easy, of course. So caring for others is enlarging the heart. And how does the heart expand? It is not an operation that the person can do by herself, remaining in her own intimacy, privacy, because the heart expands only with relationships. That is, opening herself to the relationship with the other. Many times we think that being generous, being pro-social, altruist, and so on, is an individual quality. It's an individual dimension or feature of the person. But in fact, what we need is to attribute these qualities to the relationship as an effect of individual actions, of course. But it is different to say this is a generous actor and this is a generous relationship. There are very many differences between them. So this openness becomes a true relational reality only when it is translated into building a we relation between the caregiver and the caretaker, a relationship that involves their life contexts. And I don't have time enough to understand from the sociological point of view, the role of the social context, because actions are subject-dependent and context-dependent at the same time. So why the relationship is the subject of care? We have to understand the power of social relations. And there are three ways to conceive the relationship of care. The relationship as a symbolic reference, according to a symbolic code. I have an idea of the symbol which applies to the situation, and the relationship as a social bond. There is a structural code, which means that in interacting repeatedly with the other, we build up, we create a bond which is a structure in respect to the psychological, symbolic aspect of relationships. And third, the relationship is an emergent effect with its own qualities and causal powers with respect to those of the caregiver and the caretaker. This is the generative code. I mean that interacting with each other, people, not only refer symbolically, psychologically to each other, but they build up a bond, a link, a structure, which is precisely a third, an emergent effect between them. And we do not see usually what happens in that case. And we need precisely to promote a culture of social relations in this sense if we want to manage relationships in care. Good management of helping relationships involve first the principle of reciprocity. The relationship is the product of reciprocal actions between you and other. Second, avoiding labeling or stigmatizing the person. Third, accepting a bond that can only continue on the basis of trust and mutual recognition. And fourth, reflecting on the emergent effect, so to evaluate and modify it from time to time. Care is a relational service. Not all services are relational. Most of them are not relational. They are only tasks to be performed, things to be done. So we have to understand the notion of relational service. And we have to give priority to relational services over non-relational ones, because authentic and solid social inclusion requires not only material benefits, but the construction of a social fabric. Care in the strict sense is a relational service that maximizes its purpose when it manages to create relational goods between the caregiver and the care recipient. What are the relational goods? Now, relational goods are neither things nor ideas, but properly relationships. For example, trust, cooperation, reciprocity in co-planning and co-producing relational goods, care itself. This requires that individuals learn to become relational subjects. That is, to see the other through the relationship, with the relationship, and in the relationship. And how is a relational good achieved? There are two ways to approach another person. Looking at her in front of us, in front of me, and the other tells us about herself and nothing more. And looking at the other in relation to the other. And in this case, the other tells us something, something else, because it also speaks about us. There is a reciprocity in this sense, and points to a third reality, that is the relationship between us as an included third element, which is the reality of care. Care is not my own idea or projection or imagination of what I do. And in any case, what I do is material, certainly, is physical, but the effect, the outcome of care is not in my possession, is not something that I can master properly. That's why we need relational goods. So to generate the relational goods, it's necessary to apply virtuous attitudes to their relationships with the other. Attention in the first form of care as an ethical gesture, receptivity, certain form of active passivity, an attitude of personal reflexivity and relational reflexivity. Personal reflexivity is inner reflexivity, what I think in myself, about myself, how to act. Relational reflexivity is the reflexivity of the relationship in itself. Sensitivity and responsiveness, ability to express emotions in the relationship, empathy that overcomes the division between rationality and emotion. Now, the structure of the action oriented towards the care of the other implies an unconditional motivation, a practice of personal virtues in the relationship with the other, and caring the relationship as a reflexive activity between the caregiver and the care receiver. I cannot get into the details of this. Now, we have two models that I propose to consider: the care model and the model of care as a relational service. You can read it in my paper. What is important in the model of care as a relational service is precisely that it defines health or illness or disability or fragility as a relational fact of the person, and therefore maintains the perspective of the entirety of her needs. Only by reasoning in relational terms, you can capture in a way and see and understand and accept and respect and so on the whole person. Because otherwise, if you use only one dimension of the communication, the interaction with the person, you cannot achieve the entirety of a person's need. In the case of the robots, as I already said, their limits is that the robots, as all the artifacts, are not able to replace the human relationship. And in fact, they are used to replace the human relationship. And this is the advantage and disadvantage of having the chance to care for people with robots and artifacts. What I want to underline is that it is a mistake to think that the relationship between humans and robots are not fundamentally different from the relationship between humans. Many people think that relations are always the same. Relationships between human persons, to them, are the same as between a human person, and the robot, which is not true. So this insensitivity indicates that our culture of relationship is very poor, if not absent, because if we don't understand the difference of this kind of relationship, because we don't understand the different qualities and the different causal powers of these different relationships, we get into many difficulties. Now, we could rethink the formal and informal organization of care through what I call the ODG systems, that is making a relational observation of the situation, a relational assessment or diagnosis of the situation, and what I call relational guidance to try to get solutions looking at how the relational context would work in solving the issues. Finally, humanizing care requires a relational bioethic. Present bioethic is not relational at all. It was born in the Anglo-Saxon world as a mixture of biology and ethics oriented to the individual. And bioethics becomes relational when medical health and social personnel are concerned that their intervention promotes valid relationships in the person's life world, not only the preservation of the right to life, the individual rights, of course, they are important, but bioethics should include a relational perspective, a relational vision of what kind of relations are good and what are when they are bad. I mean, we have relational goods and relational evils. Care ethics must be combined with virtue ethics. I don't go into the details. And to conclude, what today's society lacks is not so much material and technological resources, but rather the relational skills to welcome, support, and socially integrate people with disabilities and fragilities. A surplus of relational competence is required, that is, caring relational skills. Thank you very much for your attention.